When a kind-hearted McDonald's worker was caught giving leftover food to hungry homeless children, her enraged manager fired her on the spot, accusing her of theft and violating company policies. But the arrogant manager was completely unaware that sitting at one of the restaurant's tables was none other than Keanu Reeves, who had witnessed the entire shocking scene unfold. The cold Friday morning air seeped through the cracks of the McDonald's restaurant, creating a stark contrast to the warmth inside. Emma, a dedicated employee of 5 years, stood at the sink, methodically drying her hands after washing them. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, showing 10:30 a.m. The dining area was sparsely populated, with only a few scattered customers occupying tables, sipping their coffee and munching on breakfast items. Emma glanced around the quiet restaurant, her eyes lingering on the familiar faces of the morning regulars. There was old Mr. Johnson, hunched over his newspaper, his half-eaten McMuffin forgotten on the tray. In the corner, a young couple whispered to each other, their hands intertwined on the table. The peaceful atmosphere of the dining area was a stark contrast to the tension building in the kitchen. As Emma made her way back to her station, she could hear the rising voice of Mr. Bradshaw, the restaurant manager. His frustration was palpable, echoing through the kitchen as he berated his team over the contents of the faulty tray. This tray, a long-standing fixture in the kitchen, was where items that didn't meet quality standards were gathered for the manager's inspection before being discarded. "Look at this mess!" Mr. Bradshaw's voice boomed, causing Emma to flinch slightly. "How many times do I have to tell you people to pay attention to what you're doing?" Emma peered around the corner, watching as Mr. Bradshaw gestured wildly at the tray. His face was red with anger, a vein pulsing at his temple. The other staff members, Jack, Mina, and Tom, stood in a semicircle around him, their heads bowed in submission. "Do you see this?" Mr. Bradshaw held up a slightly burnt burger patty. "This is unacceptable. And look at these fries, they're practically swimming in oil." He tossed the offending items back onto the tray with disgust. Emma's heart went out to her co-workers. She knew how hard they all worked, how they strived to meet the impossibly high standards set by their manager. But Mr. Bradshaw seemed to find fault in everything they did. "And don't even get me started on these incorrect orders," he continued, his voice dripping with disdain. "Emma!" He called to her, and Emma approached the team. "Make sure you input the correct order. And you, the kitchen team, it's like you people can't read simple instructions. Do you know how much money we lose because of your incompetence?" Emma watched as Mina, usually so outspoken, bit her lip to keep from responding. Jack's shoulders were tense, his hands clenched at his sides. Tom, ever the quiet one, kept his eyes fixed on the floor. His threat came next, causing a collective shudder among the staff. "I swear, if this keeps up, I'm going to start charging all of you for the discarded items. Maybe then you'll learn to be more careful." The silence that followed was deafening. Emma could hear the soft whirring of the refrigerators, the distant chatter of customers in the dining area. She held her breath, waiting for what would come next. Finally, Mr. Bradshaw seemed to deflate slightly. He ran a hand through his thinning hair and let out a heavy sigh. "Empty this tray into the bin," he ordered, his voice slightly calmer but no less authoritative. "I'm taking a break. When I come back, I expect everything to be in order." Emma watched through the office window as Mr. Bradshaw gathered his things. He pocketed his cigarettes, wallet, and phone. Then, after a moment's hesitation, he grabbed his bag. This small action didn't escape Emma's notice, and she filed it away for later consideration. As Mr. Bradshaw exited through the back door, Emma caught the meaningful glances exchanged between Jack, Mina, and Tom. They hadn't moved to empty the faulty tray as instructed, a fact that both worried and intrigued Emma. Curiosity getting the better of her, Emma approached the back doorway. She watched until Mr. Bradshaw disappeared around the intersection, his figure growing smaller in the distance. With a quick glance over her shoulder to ensure no one was watching, Emma closed the back door but left it slightly ajar. It was a small act of defiance, one that filled her with a mix of excitement and apprehension. Returning to the kitchen, Emma found her co-workers huddled together, speaking in hushed tones. As she approached, they fell silent, eyeing her warily. "Phew, that was harsh," Emma said. "Are you guys okay?" Jack, a part-timer who had always admired Emma's kindness, nodded thoughtfully. "Yeah, he's gone now, which is a relief. We don't mess up orders on purpose. It just happens sometimes during that hectic transition between breakfast and lunch. There's always a bit of overlap with orders, and customers often don't realize the time when they place them. Plus, those new automatic order machines really need an upgrade to handle the shift better, showing what's available or not during this transition hour." He let out a sigh. Emma agreed. "I agree with you, Jack. I think Mr. Bradshaw will be gone for a while. Did you notice how he hesitated before grabbing his bag? It's like he suddenly decided to leave for more than just a quick smoke break." Jack nodded. "I think so." Mina, never one to hold back her opinions, shook her head. "I don't know, guys. He went through the back door. That usually means he's coming back soon. If he was really leaving for a while, wouldn't he go out the front and take his car?" Tom, who had been silent until now, spoke up softly. "We should be careful. None of us wants to lose our jobs." Emma nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation, but there was something else on her mind, something that made her heart race with anticipation and fear. "Those children will be here soon," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "They know the time." The others exchanged knowing looks. They were all aware of Emma's secret acts of kindness, her determination to help the homeless children who frequented the area around the restaurant. It was a risky endeavor, one that could cost them all their jobs if discovered. But in that moment, as they stood united in the quiet kitchen, there was an unspoken agreement among them. They would continue to help, to do what they could for those less fortunate, regardless of the consequences. As they dispersed to return to their duties, Emma's mind was already racing, planning how she would manage to help the children today while avoiding Mr. Bradshaw's scrutiny. Little did she know, the events about to unfold would test her resolve in ways she could never have imagined. The gentle chime of the bell above the door signaled the arrival of a customer, pulling Emma from her thoughts. She quickly composed herself, plastering on a professional smile as she approached the counter. The customer, a middle-aged man with kind eyes, smiled back at her. "Good morning," Emma greeted warmly. "What can I get for you today?" The man glanced up at the menu board, his brow furrowing slightly in concentration. "I'll have a coffee, please, and, let's add a baked apple pie and a 6-piece nugget box." Emma nodded, her fingers dancing across the touchscreen as she input the order. "Certainly, sir. Would you like your coffee black or with cream and sugar?" "Black is fine, thank you," the man replied. As Emma prepared the order, her mind wandered to the slightly open back door. She couldn't help but glance in that direction every few seconds, her heart racing with anticipation. The coffee machine hummed, filling the air with the rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee. "Here you go, sir," Emma said, placing the tray on the counter. "1 black coffee, a baked apple pie, and a 6-piece nugget box. Is there anything else I can get for you?" The man shook his head, smiling as he took the tray. "No, that's perfect, thank you." As the customer walked away, Emma quickly washed her hands again, her eyes darting between the clock on the wall and the back door. She knew she only had a small window of opportunity before Mr. Bradshaw returned. With a deep breath, Emma made her way to the back door, exchanging knowing looks with her co-workers as she passed. Jack gave her a subtle nod of encouragement, while Mina kept a watchful eye on the front of the restaurant. Tom, ever cautious, pretended to be busy cleaning the grill, but Emma could see him glancing in her direction. As Emma reached the door, she heard a soft knock. Her heart leapt in her chest as she carefully opened it, revealing a young girl in a ragged pink winter jacket. Sophia's big brown eyes looked up at Emma, a mix of hope and fear swirling in their depths. "Sophia," Emma whispered, her voice filled with relief and concern. "I'm so glad you made it. The mean man is away right now, but we have to be quick." Sophia nodded, understanding the urgency in Emma's voice. "Thank you, Miss Emma. We're really hungry today. It's very cold outside." Emma's heart clenched at the girl's words. Without hesitation, she turned to the faulty tray, quickly selecting a chicken burger and a few beef patties. She wrapped them carefully in napkins before handing them to Sophia. "Here you go, sweetie. Emma said softly. "Is this enough?" Sophia clutched the food to her chest, her eyes widening with gratitude. But then, a flicker of hesitation crossed her face. "Miss Emma, is it okay if I take this to my brother first? I'll come back for more, for me and Mum." Emma felt a lump form in her throat. The selflessness of this young girl, putting her family's needs before her own, never failed to move her. "Of course, Sophia. I know you need more. Go quickly and be careful, okay?" Sophia nodded, a small smile lighting up her face. "Thank you, Miss Emma. You're an angel." Just as Sophia was about to leave, the sound of the counterbell ringing pierced the air. Emma's heart skipped a beat. "Hurry, Sophia," she urged, "and watch for the manager on your way back, okay?" As Sophia disappeared into the alley, Emma quickly closed the door, leaving it slightly ajar as before. She rushed back to the counter, her mind racing with thoughts of Sophia and her family, even as she plastered on a smile for the next customer. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of orders and transactions, but Emma's thoughts never strayed far from the slightly open back door and the promise of Sophia's return. She found herself constantly checking the clock, counting down the minutes until she could help the young girl and her family once more. The lunch rush was just beginning to pick up when Emma's heart nearly stopped. Standing at the counter, looking as casual as any other customer, was none other than Keanu Reeves. Emma blinked hard, certain she must be imagining things, but no, it was really him, the Hollywood star, right here in her McDonald's. Taking a deep breath to calm her nerves, Emma approached the counter with a professional smile. "Good afternoon, sir. What can I get for you today?" Keanu smiled warmly, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Hi there, could I get a double cheeseburger, fries, and a Coke, please?" Emma nodded, trying to keep her hands steady as she input the order. "Certainly, sir. Will that be for here or to go?" "For here, thanks," Keanu replied, his voice just as kind and gentle as Emma had imagined it would be. As she prepared his order, Emma couldn't help but steal glances at the actor's casual outfit. It was clear he was trying to blend in, and Emma was determined to respect his privacy. "Here you go, sir," Emma said, placing the tray on the counter. "1 double cheeseburger, fries, and a Coke. Enjoy your meal." Keanu thanked her with another warm smile, before taking his tray to an outdoor table at the front of the restaurant. Emma watched him go, still hardly believing what had just happened. Her moment of starstruck wonder was interrupted by movement at the back door. Emma's heart leapt as she saw Sophia peeking in, her eyes wide and anxious. Emma quickly made her way to the back. "Sophia," Emma whispered, ushering the girl just inside the doorway to avoid the chill. "Did you manage to get the food to your brother?" Sophia nodded, her small frame shivering slightly in the cool air. "Yes, he was so happy, but I'm still really hungry, and Mom—" Emma's heart clenched at the girl's words. Without hesitation, she turned to the faulty tray, selecting more items, another burger, some chicken nuggets, and a few more patties. As she handed them to Sophia outside, she noticed the girl's eyes darting nervously. "Sophia, sweetie," Emma said gently, "I know you're hungry, but you can't stay here. It's not safe. The manager could come back any minute, and if he sees you—" Sophia's lower lip trembled. "But Miss Emma, I'm so hungry, and if I take too much back at once, the other kids might try to steal it. Can I just eat it outside?" Emma felt torn. She understood Sophia's immediate need, but she also knew the risks of letting her stay. "I know it's hard, sweetie, but you need to go. Finish your meal at your tent, okay? I don't want you to get in trouble." Sophia nodded reluctantly, clutching the food to her chest. "Thank you so much." As Sophia stepped outside the door, Emma called out softly, "Be careful, okay? And remember, you can always come back later when it's safer." Emma closed the door, leaving it slightly ajar as usual. She leaned against the wall for a moment, her heart heavy with the weight of Sophia's situation. Returning to the kitchen, Emma found Tom, Mina, and Jack huddled together, speaking in hushed tones. As she approached, they fell silent, looking at her with a mix of concern and curiosity. "Everything okay?" Jack asked, his eyes darting towards the back door. Emma nodded, running a hand through her hair. "Yeah, just, the usual." Mina shook her head, her brow furrowed. Emma, I know you want to help, but this is getting dangerous. If Mr. Bradshaw finds out—" I know, Emma sighed. But what else can we do? These kids are starving, and all this food just goes to waste otherwise. Tom, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. Maybe we need to think about this differently. There has to be a better way to distribute unused food, something more official. The group fell into a thoughtful silence, each contemplating the complex situation they found themselves in. The contrast between corporate policy and human need had never felt more stark. Their discussion was abruptly interrupted by the sound of angry shouts coming from the back of the restaurant. Emma's blood ran cold as she recognized Mr. Bradshaw's voice. "What the hell is this?" he bellowed. "Get away from there, you filthy homeless kid!" Emma, Tom, Mina, and Jack froze, exchanging panicked looks. Through the kitchen window, they could see Mr. Bradshaw advancing on a terrified Sophia, who was standing near the trash bins. Emma's heart raced. She wanted nothing more than to run out there and protect Sophia, but she knew that would only make things worse. Instead, she forced herself to turn away, noticing a new group of customers approaching the front counter. With a heavy heart, Emma moved to serve the new customers, leaving the commotion behind. As she took their order, she couldn't help but wonder if Sophia had managed to get away safely. The weight of her secret charity felt heavier than ever, and Emma knew that something would have to change soon. But for now, all she could do was continue her work and hope for the best. As Emma waited to take the order from the new group of customers at the front counter, she could feel their curious gazes peering around her. The commotion from the back of the restaurant had not gone unnoticed, and the customers' expressions ranged from concern to discomfort. "Excuse me," one of the customers, a middle-aged woman with a furrowed brow, spoke up. "What's going on back there? We heard shouting." Emma felt her stomach twist with anxiety, but she managed to keep her professional demeanor. "Oh, it's nothing to worry about," she said, forcing a smile. "Just a little misunderstanding between the manager and, well, some kids from the neighborhood." The woman's eyes widened slightly. "Kids from the neighborhood? Do you mean homeless children?" Emma's heart sank as she saw the looks exchanged between the customers. Their whispered conversations grew more animated, and she could catch snippets of words like dangerous and unsanitary. You know what?" the woman said, gathering her purse. "I think we'll just go somewhere else for lunch. Thank you anyway." Emma watched, stunned, as the group of customers turned and left the restaurant without ordering. She stood there for a moment, her mind reeling from what had just transpired. The realization that the mere mention of homeless people could drive customers away left her feeling hollow and conflicted. Before she could dwell on it further, Mr. Bradshaw's voice boomed through the restaurant. "All staff in my office, now!" Emma exchanged worried glances with her co-workers as they made their way to the manager's office. Mr. Bradshaw stood behind his desk, his face red with anger, as the team filed in. "I cannot believe what I just witnessed," he began, his voice trembling with rage. "Do you have any idea how close we came to a disaster? Those vermin could have contaminated our entire kitchen." Emma felt a surge of anger at his words, but kept her face neutral. She noticed Jack shifting uncomfortably beside her, while Mina's jaw was clenched tight. Mr. Bradshaw continued his tirade, pacing back and forth behind his desk. "From now on, I want every single one of you to be on high alert. If you see any of those homeless people approaching the restaurant, you are to call the police immediately. Do you understand?" The team murmured their assent, but Emma could feel the tension in the room. Mr. Bradshaw's words felt like a physical weight on her shoulders, and she couldn't help but think of Sophia and her family. "These people are like disease-carrying rats," Mr. Bradshaw snarled. "They scare off decent customers and bring nothing but trouble. I won't let them ruin our business. Just look at how small this chain is compared to other McDonald's locations. It's my responsibility to improve it for the owner. If the owner found out about this, it'd be my job on the line. Do you understand me?" The team nodded. As Mr. Bradshaw dismissed them, Emma caught sight of her co-workers' faces. Tom looked troubled, his usual quiet demeanor replaced by a furrowed brow. Mina's eyes flashed with barely concealed anger, while Jack just looked sad. Once outside the office, Emma mouthed a silent thank you to her co-workers for maintaining her secret. They responded with subtle nods and understanding looks, their silent solidarity a small comfort in the face of Mr. Bradshaw's harsh words. As they returned to their stations, Emma's mind wandered back to the customers who had left earlier. She couldn't shake the memory of their disgusted reactions, the way they had recoiled at the mere mention of homeless children. It made her wonder about society as a whole. How many people shared that disgust? How many would turn away from those who needed help the most? The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of customers and orders, but Emma's thoughts remained preoccupied. She found herself watching the clock, counting down the hours until she could potentially help Sophia and the others again. The weight of her secret felt heavier than ever, but her resolve to continue helping only grew stronger. The clock struck noon, signaling the start of the lunch rush. Emma moved with practiced efficiency, her hands flying over the cash register as she took orders and handed out trays. The familiar rhythm of the busy period helped to momentarily push her worries to the back of her mind. For the next 3 hours, the restaurant was a whirlwind of activity. Emma barely had time to think as she juggled multiple orders, dealt with indecisive customers, and ensured that everything ran smoothly. It wasn't until 3 p.m., when the customer traffic finally began to slow, that she allowed herself to take a deep breath. As the last customer of the rush moved away from the counter, Emma glanced at the clock. Her heart rate picked up as she realized it was time for her planned break, and her personal mission. "Mina," Emma called out, trying to keep her voice casual. "Can you cover the counter for me? I'm going to take my break now." Mina nodded, a knowing look in her eyes. "Sure thing, Emma, take your time." Emma made her way to Mr. Bradshaw's office, knocking lightly on the door. When she heard his gruff, "Come in," she steeled herself before entering. "Mr. Bradshaw," she said, keeping her voice steady, "I'm going to take my lunch break now, if that's all right." The manager barely looked up from his computer. "Fine, 30 minutes, not a second more. We're short-staffed as it is." Emma nodded, biting back a retort about how they wouldn't be short-staffed if he hadn't cut hours. Instead, she simply said, "Thank you, sir," and left the office. Her heart was pounding as she made her way to the back entry. As she pushed open the door, the cool afternoon air hit her face, and she took a moment to gather her thoughts. She had 30 minutes. 30 precious minutes to find Sophia and her family, to make sure they were okay after the morning's incident. As Emma stepped outside, her eyes immediately fell on something that made her heart sink. There, on the concrete sidewalk, lay a perfectly wrapped burger, the one she had given to Sophia for her mother earlier that day. Emma bent down to pick it up, her fingers trembling slightly. The sight of the dropped food was a stark reminder of the fear Sophia must have felt when Mr. Bradshaw had shouted at her. Emma could imagine the girl running away in panic, the food falling from her grasp unnoticed. The thought made Emma's chest tighten with a mixture of sadness and determination. Clutching the burger, Emma set off down the nearby alleys. She knew she was racing against time. Nearly 10 minutes of her break had already passed. Her eyes scanned the area, looking for any sign of Sophia or her family. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Emma spotted a flash of pink in the distance. Her heart leapt as she recognized the tent Sophia had once described as her home. It was tucked away in a small alcove, partially hidden from view. Emma approached cautiously, not wanting to startle the occupants. She knelt down near the entrance of the tent and called out softly, "Sophia, are you there? It's Emma from McDonald's." There was a rustling sound from inside the tent, and then the flap opened slightly. Emma's eyes widened in surprise as she found herself face to face not with Sophia, but with a woman who bore a striking resemblance to the young girl. The woman's eyes were wary, but there was a flicker of recognition in them as she looked at Emma. You're the one who helped Sophia," the woman said, her voice barely above a whisper. Emma nodded, offering a gentle smile. "Yes, that's right, I'm Emma. Is Sophia here? I wanted to make sure she was okay after what happened this morning." The woman's face softened slightly. "She's not here right now. She went to look for her brother, but thank you for helping her, for helping us." As the woman spoke, Emma noticed movement behind her. To her shock, she saw a tiny bundle cradled in the woman's arms, a newborn baby, no more than a few weeks old. "Oh," Emma breathed, her eyes wide. I didn't know Sophia had a new baby sister." The woman nodded, a mix of pride and worry crossing her face. "She was born 3 weeks ago. It's been difficult." Emma's mind raced, suddenly understanding why Sophia had been asking for more food lately. Of course, her mother would need extra nutrition while breastfeeding, especially in this cold weather. "I'm so sorry," Emma said, her voice filled with compassion. "I had no idea. Is there anything I can do to help?" The woman hesitated for a moment before speaking. I'm not sure. After what happened this morning, she was so scared. She thought she might have to start looking for food in other areas, but we don't know many places that would help us." Emma's heart clenched at the thought of Sophia wandering the streets alone, searching for food. "Of course," she said quickly. "Please tell her to come back to the restaurant after 5 p.m. The manager will be gone by then. And tell her to watch for a black Ford Explorer with the license plate XMT 5392. If that car is gone, it's safe for her to come." The woman nodded, gratitude shining in her eyes. "Thank you, Emma. You're an angel." As Emma stood to leave, she realized with a start that her break was almost over. She had to hurry back to the restaurant. "I have to go now," she said apologetically, "but please make sure Sophia knows it's safe to come back. I'll be waiting for her." With a final nod to the woman, Emma turned and hurried back towards McDonald's. Her mind was whirling with everything she had learned. A new baby, the increased need for food, the fear that kept Sophia away. It was almost too much to process. As she approached the back entry of the restaurant, Emma paused for a moment. She pulled out a cigarette and a small cracker from her pocket, attempting to calm her nerves before returning to work. Her appetite had vanished, overwhelmed by her worries for Sophia and her family. Taking a deep breath, Emma stubbed out her barely smoked cigarette and straightened her uniform. She had to focus now, had to get through the rest of her shift. But her mind was already racing ahead, planning how she could help Sophia and her family even more. As she pushed open the back door and stepped into the familiar warmth of the kitchen, Emma knew that her mission had just become even more important, and even more dangerous. The afternoon wore on, a steady stream of customers keeping Emma busy at the counter. Despite the constant activity, her mind kept drifting back to Sophia and her family. The image of the newborn baby, so vulnerable in such harsh conditions, haunted her thoughts. As she served another customer, Emma's eyes were drawn to movement outside. Keanu was still at his outdoor table, his laptop now open in front of him. The actor's face was partially obscured, both by the screen and his efforts to remain inconspicuous. Emma couldn't help but intrigued by his extended stay. She wondered what could be keeping him there for so long, but pushed the thought aside as another rush of customers demanded her attention. A lull in customers gave Emma a moment to breathe. On impulse, she decided to treat Keanu to something extra. She quickly prepared a tray with a baked apple pie, a fresh cup of coffee, and a box of 6 chicken nuggets. Stepping outside, Emma approached Keanu's table. "Excuse me, sir," she said softly. "I thought you might like a little something extra. It's on the house." Keanu looked up, surprise evident on his face. "Oh, that's very kind of you, but it's not necessary. I'm fine, really." Emma smiled, placing the tray on the table. "Please, I insist, it's my treat. I noticed you've been here for quite a while." Keanu's expression softened as he studied her face. "You know, I have a feeling this isn't really on the house, is it? It's coming out of your own pocket, right?" Emma felt a blush creep up her cheeks, surprised by his perceptiveness. "Well, yes, but please accept it. I've noticed you waiting here for so long, and I just wanted to do something nice." A warm smile spread across Keanu's face. "In that case, I'll gladly accept." "Thank you, Emma," he said, glancing at her name tag. "Your kindness is truly appreciated." As Emma turned to leave, Keanu spoke again. "You know, I'm actually working while I wait, making the most of my time here. This friend I'm meeting, well, let's just say they're pretty important." Emma nodded, curiosity piqued, but not wanting to pry. "Well, if you need anything else, just let me know." As Emma walked back into the restaurant, she felt a small sense of accomplishment. In the midst of all the stress and worry of the day, this small act of kindness towards Keanu felt like a tiny victory. She returned to her position behind the counter, her mind still occupied with thoughts of Sophia and her family, but also with a renewed sense of purpose. The afternoon stretched on, with Emma keeping one eye on the clock, waiting for the moment when she could potentially help those in need once again. As the end of office hours approached, Emma felt a mixture of relief and anticipation. The restaurant was quieter now, with only a few customers lingering over late lunches or early dinners. Finally, Mr. Bradshaw emerged from his office, car keys in hand. "Emma," he called out as he passed the counter, "you're in charge of closing up tonight. Make sure every procedure is followed to the letter. Take pictures of the closings and send it to me. And I also want a full report in the morning. Understand?" "Yes, sir," Emma replied. With a curt nod, Mr. Bradshaw turned and headed for the front door. Emma watched as he pushed it open, the bell above jingling softly. The sound of his footsteps faded as he walked across the parking lot. A moment later, the distinctive rumble of his Ford Explorer's engine filled the air. Emma held her breath, listening, as the sound of the car grew fainter and fainter until it disappeared entirely. Only then did she allow herself to relax, her shoulders dropping as she let out a long, slow exhale. The atmosphere in the restaurant seemed to shift immediately. It was as if a heavy weight had been lifted, allowing everyone to breathe a little easier. Emma's co-workers began to gravitate towards her, their faces a mix of relief and anticipation. Jack was the first to speak, a grin spreading across his face as he leaned against the counter. "He's really gone for the day," he said, his voice low but filled with excitement. "We're in the clear." Mina, however, looked less certain. She glanced towards the back door, her brow furrowed with concern. "Emma," she began, her voice hesitant, "do you think Sophia will come back after what happened this morning? Maybe we should rethink how we're doing this." Tom, who had been quietly wiping down tables nearby, joined the group. He nodded in agreement with Mina, his usually stoic face etched with worry. "She's right, Emma, this isn't sustainable. We're going to get caught one of these days." Emma sighed, running a hand through her hair as she considered their words. She knew they were right. The risk they were taking was significant. But the image of Sophia's hopeful face, of the gratitude in her mother's eyes, was burned into Emma's memory. "I know," she said softly, looking at each of her co-workers in turn. "You're right. I'll think about it and try to come up with a better plan, but for now—" She paused, her resolve strengthening. "For now, we need to be ready. Those kids are counting on us." As if on cue, a soft sound drifted in from the back entry. Emma's heart leapt at the familiar shuffling of small feet, the hushed whispers of anticipation. She exchanged a quick glance with her co-workers before hurrying to the back door. With careful movements, Emma eased the door open. The cool evening air rushed in, carrying with it the scents of the city, car exhaust, the faint aroma of nearby restaurants, and underneath it all, the unmistakable staleness of the streets. There, huddled in the alley, were 6 homeless children and 4 adults, their eyes wide with hope and hunger, fixed on Emma as she appeared in the doorway. The sight of them, so vulnerable and yet so resilient, strengthened Emma's resolve. Without a word, she began her now familiar routine. She moved swiftly but quietly, gathering leftover Happy Meals for the children and older burgers for the adults. As she distributed the food, she made sure to make eye contact with each person, offering a smile or a gentle touch on the shoulder. The gratitude in their eyes, the whispered thank you, and the shy smiles of the children made all the risk worthwhile. Emma felt a warmth spread through her chest, a sense of purpose that no amount of corporate policy could diminish. As she handed out the last of the meals, Emma's eyes scanned the group, searching for a familiar face. Her heart sank a little when she didn't see Sophia, worry creeping in as she remembered the events of the morning. But then, just as she was about to close the door, a flash of pink caught her eye. There, at the back of the group, was Sophia. The young girl was partially hidden behind her brother, her mother standing protectively beside them, and in her mother's arms, bundled tightly against the evening chill, was the baby Emma had seen earlier. "Sophia!" Emma exclaimed, relief flooding through her. She knelt down, bringing herself to eye level with the young girl. "Are you okay? Did you get hurt earlier because of the manager?" Sophia stepped forward, a small smile on her face despite the wariness in her eyes. "I'm okay, Miss Emma," she said softly. "Just a little wound on my leg, but it's bandaged now." Emma's heart clenched at the thought of Sophia being injured. She reached out slowly, giving the girl time to pull away if she wanted, and gently squeezed her shoulder. "I was so worried about you," Emma admitted. "I even went looking for you at your tent earlier, but you weren't there." "Mom told me," Sophia replied, glancing up at her mother. "I was out looking for my brother, for food, and also someone who could help with the wound on my thigh." Emma nodded, understanding dawning on her face. She turned her attention to preparing a special box for the family, her movements deliberate as she selected items with care. Burgers, nuggets, chicken, and extra patties went into the box, with Emma paying particular attention to including protein-rich items. As she handed the box to Sophia's mother, Emma spoke quietly, her voice filled with concern and compassion. "I made sure to include extra protein for you," she explained. "It's important while you're nursing." The woman's eyes filled with tears of gratitude, her arms tightening around the baby as she accepted the box. "Thank you, Emma," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "You don't know what this means to us." Emma felt a lump form in her throat, overwhelmed by the impact of her small acts of kindness. She was about to respond when suddenly a familiar voice boomed from behind her, shattering the moment of connection and compassion. "What the hell is going on here?" Emma's blood ran cold as she turned to see Mr. Bradshaw standing in the doorway, his face contorted with rage. Time seemed to stand still as Emma turned to face Mr. Bradshaw. The manager's unexpected return had caught everyone off guard, and the atmosphere in the alley shifted from one of quiet gratitude to palpable fear. Mr. Bradshaw's eyes darted from Emma to the group of homeless individuals, his face growing redder by the second. The vein in his forehead pulsed visibly as he struggled to comprehend the scene before him. "I can't believe my eyes," he finally sputtered, his voice trembling with rage. Each word seemed to build in volume as he continued. "So this is why we've had problems with resilient homeless people hanging around. My own staff has been feeding them like stray cats." Emma felt her heart pounding in her chest, her palms growing clammy with fear. She was acutely aware of Sophia and her family behind her, of the other homeless individuals shrinking back into the shadows of the alley. Inside the restaurant, she could see Tom, Mina, and Jack frozen in place, their faces a mixture of shock and helplessness. Mr. Bradshaw strode toward Emma, his steps deliberate and forceful. "I expected you to be the one I could trust most on this team," he snarled, his voice dripping with contempt. "There's no tolerance for this kind of insubordination," he barked, spittle escaping with his words. "You're suspended immediately for violating company rules and stealing food." Emma opened her mouth to protest, but Mr. Bradshaw cut her off, his gaze sweeping over her co-workers inside. "And don't think I don't know about the rest of you," he added, his voice dripping with accusation. "You must all be in on it, making false orders and intentionally creating faulty products to feed these vagrants." The injustice of his words finally broke through Emma's shock. She found her voice, desperate to protect her co-workers. "No, sir, that's not true," she said, her words coming out in a rush. "They never did anything like that. We only took old leftovers and truly faulty products that didn't pass quality control." For a moment, Mr. Bradshaw seemed taken aback by her defiance. Then his face contorted with renewed anger. "Get out!" he shouted, the force of his voice making Emma flinch. "Get out of my restaurant right now!" Before Emma could even think about retrieving her personal belongings, Mr. Bradshaw was shoving her towards the door. In his haste, he knocked into Sophia, who had been clinging to her mother in fear. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Mr. Bradshaw, his judgment clouded by rage, grabbed Sophia by the hair. The girl let out a cry of pain and fear as he attempted to drag her towards the front entrance. "No!" Sophia's mother cried out, her voice filled with anguish. She tried to reach for her daughter, but the baby in her arms and the shock of the moment slowed her movements. Emma, horrified by the turn of events, found herself moving without conscious thought. She followed Mr. Bradshaw, her voice rising in desperation. "Please, sir, don't hurt her. She's already injured." The commotion had drawn the attention of the few remaining customers in the restaurant. They watched in stunned silence as Mr. Bradshaw dragged Sophia towards the front entrance, Emma close behind, pleading for the girl's safety. At the restaurant's threshold, Mr. Bradshaw suddenly stopped. He turned to Emma, his face a mask of disgust and fury. "You're fired," he snarled, the words hitting Emma like a physical blow. "Take your car and go. I don't want to see your face around here ever again." With that, he released his grip on Sophia, who immediately ran back to her mother's arms. Both the girl and Emma were in tears, the shock of the situation overwhelming them. Mr. Bradshaw stormed back inside, leaving Emma, Sophia, and her family standing in stunned silence on the sidewalk. The evening air felt cold against Emma's tear-stained cheeks as she tried to process what had just happened. The scene had drawn the attention of everyone in the vicinity, including Keanu, who had witnessed the entire incident from his outdoor table. Emma saw him rise from his seat, his face a mixture of concern and determination. As Emma stood there, her mind reeling, she felt a gentle hand on her shoulder. She turned to see Keanu standing beside her, his presence somehow both comforting and surreal. "That was completely unacceptable," he said, his voice low and steady. The calm authority in his tone was a stark contrast to Mr. Bradshaw's uncontrolled rage. "I saw everything. Are you all right?" Emma nodded numbly, still struggling to find words. The reality of her situation, fired, her secret exposed, was slowly sinking in. But even in her shock, her first thought was for Sophia and her family. "We need to make sure they're okay," Emma said, her voice hoarse as she turned back to Sophia and her mother. Keanu nodded in agreement, his eyes reflecting a mix of compassion and resolve. Absolutely. And then, if you're willing, I think we need to have a conversation with your manager. This kind of behavior can't be allowed to continue." As they moved to check on Sophia and her family, Emma felt a glimmer of hope pierce through her despair. Perhaps with this unexpected ally, they could find a way to make things right. The evening air had grown cooler, a gentle breeze carrying the scent of approaching rain. Emma and Keanu approached Sophia and her family, who were still huddled together near the restaurant's entrance. The young girl's eyes were wide with fear, tears streaking her dirty cheeks. Her mother held the baby close to her chest, as if trying to shield it from the harshness of the world around them. Emma knelt down, bringing herself to Sophia's eye level. Her voice was soft, filled with concern and regret. "Are you all okay? I'm so sorry this happened. He had no right to treat you that way." Sophia nodded silently, her lower lip trembling. Her mother spoke up, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you for trying to help us. We should go now before he comes back." Keanu, who had been observing the interaction with a furrowed brow, stepped forward. His presence seemed to fill the space, commanding attention without a word. He addressed Sophia's mother directly, his tone gentle but firm. "Please wait a moment," he said. "I think we might be able to help make this situation right." He turned to Emma, his eyes questioning. "Are you willing to confront your manager about this? I'll back you up." Emma hesitated, her mind racing. The fear of losing her job warred with her sense of justice. But as she looked at Sophia's frightened face, at the desperation in her mother's eyes, she knew what she had to do. She took a deep breath, squaring her shoulders. "Yes," she said firmly, her voice stronger than she felt. "Let's do it." Turning back to Sophia's family, Emma spoke softly but with determination. "Please wait here for a few minutes. We're going to try to fix this." With one last reassuring nod to Sophia, Emma and Keanu entered the restaurant. The atmosphere inside was tense, thick with unspoken words and nervous glances. Customers whispered among themselves, their eyes darting between Emma and the manager's office. The staff members busied themselves with menial tasks, avoiding eye contact. Mr. Bradshaw was behind the counter, his face still flushed with anger. As Emma and Keanu approached, His expression morphed from anger to surprise, then to a forced politeness as he recognized the actor. "Mr. Reeves," he said, his voice strained, a poor attempt at cordiality. "I apologize for any disturbance. How can I help you?" Keanu's demeanor was calm but authoritative. He stood tall, his presence filling the space between them. "I witnessed what just happened outside," he began, his voice level but carrying an undercurrent of steel. "And I have to say, I found it completely unacceptable. The way you treated your employee and those people in need was appalling." Mr. Bradshaw's facade of politeness began to crack. His jaw clenched, a vein pulsing at his temple. "With all due respect, sir," he said, his words clipped, "you don't understand the situation. That employee was stealing food and encouraging vagrants to loiter around our establishment. It's bad for business." Emma, emboldened by Keanu's support, found her voice. "That's not true, Mr. Bradshaw," she said, her words coming out stronger than she expected. "We were only giving away food that would have been thrown out anyway. And those people are human beings who need help, not vagrants to be chased away." Mr. Bradshaw's face reddened again, his composure slipping further. "How dare you speak to me like that?" he sputtered, spittle flying from his lips. "You're fired, remember? You have no right to be in here." The tension in the restaurant had reached a fever pitch. Customers watched wide-eyed, forgotten meals cooling on their trays. Staff members had stopped pretending to work, their attention fully on the confrontation unfolding before them. Just as the situation seemed about to escalate further, the restaurant's front door opened with a soft chime. A man in a crisp suit walked in, his presence immediately commanding attention. He was tall, with salt-and-pepper hair and an air of quiet authority. Keanu turned to greet him, a smile of recognition on his face. "Clarkson, it's been a long time," he said, shaking the man's hand. The newcomer looked around the tense scene with concern. His eyes took in the frozen tableau, Emma and Keanu facing off against a red-faced Mr. Bradshaw, the watching customers and staff. "I apologize for my delayed arrival," Clarkson said, his voice calm but carrying a note of authority that made everyone stand a little straighter. "My flight was delayed. What's going on here? Is there a problem with my manager?" Emma's mouth gaped open as she realized Keanu's friend, the one he's been waiting for the whole day, is none other than the franchise owner. Keanu quickly filled Clarkson in on the events that had transpired, from Emma's acts of kindness to Mr. Bradshaw's aggressive behavior. As he spoke, Emma noticed Mr. Bradshaw's face growing paler by the second, the reality of the situation seemingly dawning on him. When Keanu finished, Clarkson turned to Mr. Bradshaw, his expression grave. "Is this true?" he asked, his tone leaving no room for evasion. Mr. Bradshaw stammered, trying to defend himself, but Clarkson held up a hand to silence him. The restaurant fell quiet, the only sound the soft hum of the refrigerators and the muted traffic outside. "I've heard enough," Clarkson said firmly. "Mr. Bradshaw, your behavior is completely unacceptable and goes against everything our company stands for. You're terminated, effective immediately." The words hung in the air, their impact rippling through the restaurant. Mr. Bradshaw stood frozen, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Then, without another word, he gathered his things and left, the bell above the door jingling softly as it closed behind him. Emma stood there, hardly daring to believe what had just happened. The relief she felt was tempered by uncertainty about what would come next. Clarkson turned to her, his expression softening. "Emma, is it? I'd like to hear more about what you've been doing to help those in need. It seems we have a lot to discuss." As the tension in the restaurant began to dissipate, Emma felt a wave of hope wash over her. She glanced at Keanu, who gave her an encouraging nod. With a deep breath, she began to share her story, her voice growing stronger with each word. The future, which had seemed so bleak just moments ago, now held the promise of change, real, positive change that could make a difference in the lives of people like Sophia and her family. The soft glow of the evening sun filtered through the windows of the McDonald's restaurant, casting long shadows across the now quiet dining area. In the manager's office, a group had gathered, their faces a mixture of anticipation and nervous energy. Emma stood near the door, her fingers fidgeting with the hem of her uniform shirt. Beside her, Keanu leaned against the wall, his presence a reassuring anchor in the unfamiliar situation. Clarkson, the franchise owner, sat behind the desk that had, until recently, belonged to Mr. Bradshaw. His eyes moved thoughtfully from person to person as he spoke, his voice calm and measured. "First," he began, "I want to apologize for not being aware of the situation here. My absence from this location left me blind to the growing homeless population in the area and the issues within our restaurant's management." He paused, his gaze settling on Keanu. A small smile played on his lips as he continued. "Keanu and I have been discussing an upcoming charity project and how to grow this chain, which is why he's been here observing today. It seems fate had other plans for us." Emma's eyes widened at this revelation, her mind racing back to her earlier interactions with Keanu. She felt a mixture of embarrassment and gratitude, realizing that her small act of kindness towards him had been noticed by someone who was there to evaluate the restaurant's operations. The room fell silent for a moment, the weight of possibility hanging in the air. Emma felt her heart pounding, a thought that had been forming in her mind all day suddenly crystallizing into words. Before she could second-guess herself, she took a step forward. "Mr. Clarkson," she said, her voice soft but steady, "if I may, I have a suggestion." Clarkson nodded encouragingly, his eyes kind. "Go ahead, Emma, I'm all ears." Taking a deep breath, Emma continued, her words coming faster now as her passion took over. "What if we formalized the food distribution to the homeless? Instead of doing it secretly, we could make it an official policy. We could set up a system to ensure that food that would otherwise go to waste gets to those who need it most." The room fell silent as everyone considered Emma's words. She could feel the weight of their gazes, but she stood her ground, believing in the importance of her idea. Keanu was the first to break the silence, his eyes bright with enthusiasm. "That's an excellent idea, Emma," he said, straightening up from his position against the wall. "We could even improve on your current system, make it more efficient and organized than the backdoor approach." Clarkson nodded slowly, a thoughtful expression on his face. "I like where this is going," he said, leaning forward in his chair. "Tell me more about how you've been handling things so far, Emma." For the next hour, the small office buzzed with conversation. Emma explained her methods for distributing leftover food, her voice growing more confident as she spoke. Her co-workers, Tom, Mina, and Jack, chimed in with their own observations and suggestions, each contribution building on the last. Keanu and Clarkson listened intently, occasionally asking questions or offering ideas of their own. The energy in the room was palpable, a sense of possibility and hope filling the air. As the conversation progressed, Emma could hardly believe how quickly things were changing. Just hours ago, she had been afraid of losing her job. Now she was helping to shape a new company policy that could make a real difference in people's lives. Finally, Clarkson held up a hand, a smile spreading across his face. "I think we have the beginnings of something truly special here," he said, his voice warm with approval. He turned to Emma, his expression serious but kind. "Emma, your compassion and initiative are exactly what this company needs. I'd like to offer you the position of manager for this location." Emma's jaw dropped, her mind struggling to process what she had just heard. "Me?" she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I don't know if I'm qualified." Keanu stepped forward, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You've already been doing the job, Emma," he said softly. "You've shown leadership, compassion, and the ability to think outside the box. Those are qualities that can't be taught." Clarkson nodded in agreement. "He's right," he added. "With some additional training, I believe you'll excel in this role. What do you say?" Emma looked around at her co-workers, seeing their encouraging smiles and nods. She thought of Sophia and her family, of all the people she'd been able to help. With this new position, she could do even more. The realization filled her with a sense of purpose and determination. "I accept," Emma said, her voice growing stronger with each word. "Thank you for this opportunity. I won't let you down." As the meeting concluded, Emma's co-workers surrounded her, their voices a chorus of congratulations and support. Tom, Mina, and Jack were especially enthusiastic, their earlier concerns about the risks of their secret operation now replaced with excitement for the future. "You deserve this, Emma," Mina said, pulling her into a tight hug. "We're all behind you 100%. As they filed out of the office, Emma noticed movement at the back door. Sophia's face peered in, her eyes wide with curiosity and a hint of fear. Emma beckoned her over, and the young girl approached cautiously, her family following close behind. Emma knelt down, bringing herself to Sophia's eye level. "Sophia," she said softly, her voice filled with warmth, "I have some good news. We're going to be able to help you and your family and others like you even more now, and you won't have to be afraid or hide anymore." Sophia's face lit up with a smile that seemed to brighten the entire room. "Really, Miss Emma, you mean it?" she asked, hope shining in her eyes. Emma nodded, feeling tears of joy prick at her eyes. "I really mean it," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Things are going to get better, I promise." As Sophia threw her arms around Emma in a tight hug, Emma looked up to see Keanu and Clarkson watching the scene with approval. She knew there would be challenges ahead, but in that moment, surrounded by her co-workers, Sophia's family, and her unexpected allies, Emma felt ready to face whatever came next. The McDonald's restaurant, once a place of secret kindnesses and hidden tensions, was transforming before their eyes into a beacon of hope and community support. And Emma, with her unwavering compassion and newfound authority, was at the heart of it all, ready to lead the way into a brighter future for everyone.